We're we're going to talk about how you can win more races by taking care of these. So that's what we're talking about tonight. I gotta try not to get in trouble in the first like 10-15 seconds of these videos. So that's why we don't just say some things. But I am freehanding the camera for a little bit. Bear with me. We're going to talk axles tonight and how Spec Miata helped me not tear stuff up. And it might help you not tear stuff up, okay? But I have parts strewn about, and I'm going to show you guys all that. So that's why I'm kind of freehanding the camera. So bear with me with the camera stuff tonight, okay? Working on Dad's car. Getting it back together. Things are going back together. So we got the motor mounts fixed, trans mount fixed, got the left front almost all the way put back together. But the boot was tore on the axle. And so I had to get the trans mount all done and the motor mount all done so the motor and tranny could hang, so I could drain the oil out of the transmission so I could pull the axle out so that I could boot the axle. And I thought we'd do it on a show. So that's why we're going live at like 10 o'clock at night. So, yeah. But here we are. I'm going to show you guys something that I did years ago to help extend. I broke an axle, and I said, I'm not going to do that again. And then I found some stuff that Spec Miata was doing and did his mine, haven't had any problems. So, yeah. Now, to reboot this axle, I have a baggie here, bucket. This is just like good used boots that I was going to put on. And if you guys need, you can buy just the clamps. So these are some universal clamps. You'll notice all of the holes there. I'm going to open these up and I'll show you how they work in just a few minutes. But that's what the plan was just to do that. And then I was like, oh, this grease looks black. We're gonna redo it. And so here we are. Let me flip this around. Oh, I turned it off. All right, let me flip the camera around. It's a lot harder to do because we are live on YouTube and Facebook. So it's just a little bit harder. But all right, there we go. This is the axle that was in the left front of this car at Bristol. But this is the left front that was in my car for like 2 years, 3 years, something like that. Ever since 2019, when I finished third. So 2019 on, this axle's been in my car, okay? Now, this is the inner boot that goes over this side. A lot of axle failures tend to happen in kind of 3 places that I've figured out, okay, that I've seen, right? The first one is that they'll just break the shaft. If something happens where you shock load the system, you'll just break the shaft in half, okay? The next one that happens is in this region, okay? You can include the cup, so you might break the outer cup, you might break the retainer, you might break, I don't know what they call this part, but you might break one of these 3. That's what happened to me at Bristol. Is it got really hot, it locked up, and I ended up breaking this part when I tried to turn too far, okay? So that's what happened to me. The other one that I see happen is you'll either break this piece off here, which goes into the transmission, or you will pull it out. You can extend it out too far. That happens a lot on the left-hand side for like your left front axle, right? All right, I need you guys to tell me, if I turn the camera like this, does it work properly for you guys? Can I switch between the two? That would be baller if I could do that, because I can't zoom in. I don't know how to zoom in. So this would help, okay? And I'm gonna try to put you guys in here so we can do this like POV shoot right here. Okay, awesome. Dad says it works fine, right? Woo, way better that way. I thought so, but all right. I also have my handy dandy flashlight. Okay. Now I do want to point out the cheating that I'm going to show you. I don't think is actually cheating anywhere that I've seen for us as far as stock car guys go. So just keep that in mind that you know, Spec Miata cheating and stock car cheating are not necessarily the same thing. Okay. All right, we good? We good, table? We good? Okay. All right. Now, this is your outer joint. This goes into the bearing. It is what physically drives the actual hub. Okay. Axle nut goes on here. This tightened together is usually what tightens the bearing up. Okay. On the inside of this, you'll notice these tracks. Okay. You'll notice these tracks. All right. This part here goes on this splined part of the axle. Okay. Close. All right. There we go. Okay. So that goes over the splined part. It does go up farther, but there is a C-clip on there. So I'm not going to shove it on farther. Okay. This on there is in the middle. And as you can tell, that wouldn't do anything, right? That's where the balls come in. Okay. The balls go in between here. And then they rest in there. Okay. We're going to try, I'll try to make this kind of half work. Because this isn't really how it's meant to go. Okay. But they basically go together down in here. Okay. And then that, as it turns, pushes against the ball, pushes against the cup, which turns everything. That is the general idea of the outer joint of the CV axles. Okay. Now, the reason that you have this cup and the reason you have this spline and the reason you have the balls is because you have to turn. So a regular U-joint won't work so well in this application because you need to do this, and a regular U-joint would speed up and slow down as you're going through that rotation. The constant velocity joint, you don't have that. Okay. So you'll notice that this is curved and the inside of this is curved as well. The idea being that you can turn and continue to drive power. Now, the other nice part is that happens to work in all directions. So that's why you can have camber. You can have, you know, whichever way of camber you want, plus you can turn, right? Now, the problem is that if you just had this piece, the cup, and the balls, there's nothing that would stop it from coming apart. That's where the cage comes into effect. Okay. The cage, the star piece, goes inside of the cage. Trying to do this through the camera. It's not as much fun. Okay. So it goes into the cage. Your balls go in here. Okay. So that holds them there. And then that assembly is inside of there. Now I'm going to reassemble this for you guys. I took it apart so I can clean all the grease off. I'm going to reassemble this for you here in just a minute, just to show you kind of how it all works a little bit better. Okay. But this cage does not just fit in. So you have to finagle the cage in. Okay. Kurt, come on. Don't make me a liar. Okay. And when the cage is in, that is what holds the balls from falling out. And the balls are held in. This part is also held in through all of it. So that's where the cage helps hold it all together. That is the basic understanding of a CV joint. Is there any questions on the basic operation of one of these that I can answer before we go forward, just to make sure we're all on the same page before we start getting into the advanced topics? So if there's any questions, throw them out there so I can see them, and we'll go from there. Now, the inner almost always has this setup. Okay. This setup has a flanged part here. I'm going to take a close look. I don't believe, yeah, most of these, that outer band goes on and it gets swedged. So like these are not supposed to come apart in my experience. What you can do, there's a C-clip on the end of this axle. Okay. C-clip on the end there. You can undo that. You can pull this trunnion off, okay? But it is not, like, the bearings themselves don't come apart, okay? This simply slides in here and then rides along there, okay? This does not give you the same amount of angle, but it does allow this to go in and out, okay? This is why when you're measuring axles, it matters whether it's fully compressed or whether it's extended. Because as you can see in there, there's quite a bit of depth inside of it that those trunnions can roll on, okay? That they can go in and out on, right? That's why if you have an axle that's too short, or if you have too much camber that's pulling this axle, if you have these trunnions out here, it's easy to pop these apart and have issues if they're at the end. It's also why some guys will weld a piece across here to hold those in. If you do that, your other end is held tight. You'll likely just pull it out of the transmission because it's still stressed. Okay. And as you're turning and going up and down, this is going to move in and out, whether it's a lot or a little, depends on your setup, your car, but it does move in and out. And the roller bearings just allow it to smoothly transmit that power as it's able to go in and out as it cycles. Okay. So that's the inner. Any questions on that? If there is, like I said, don't be afraid to speak up, ask questions. If you've never seen one of these apart, it's perfectly reasonable that you wouldn't know how this works if you've never seen one that's been taken apart. Just wiping the grease off my hands. I did the best I could, but these things are greasy. Grease, right? Okay. So how can we improve these for no money? I mean, essentially no money. Okay. How can we improve these without, just with this step? Actually, I'm going to step over to the toolbox because I forgot to grab one thing. So stare at these for a second and I might yell at you as I walk. This is where we're getting into the Spec Miata stuff that we did, that I did to them, but trying to grab the tool. Small enough. So, just a second. I thought about this. Oh, you know, all right. So I thought about this before I went live, but of course, in usual Todd fashion, totally, absolutely forgot to grab these. So, yeah. All right. Now, this is all that you need to do what I'm about to describe to you. Right here. This is it. You can use a drill. You can use a die grinder. This is what you need. Are these little cartridge rolls? And that is a cartridge roll. It's just, I actually prefer these for that because they don't have a lot of grit. You don't want the new ones. Okay. Now, how can I use these to improve things? And how are these what Spec Miata got caught cheating with? These cages. Okay. I wish I had a stock one to show you, but I don't. This is the only axle I have here that I can tear apart. Okay. Those balls should not. Woo! I need that back. I need that back. These balls should not pass freely through this cage. Okay. I am going to do that all night. I just can't. I'm going to keep dropping my balls. Okay. But they should not pass in and out of this cage freely. If you ever take one of these apart, you'll find that this is a major pain in the butt. Okay. Now, this axle actually also has a little bit of play right here. Hard to see on this one. Inside this cup also has a little bit of play around that ball. And I do mean a little bit. Okay. Now, I'm actually going to show you something about this cup that makes me glad that I took this apart. You actually look down in there. You can see, so at the top of my finger there, actually, oh, there we go. Not quite as bright. Right there right there, right there, right there, right there, right there, all the way around. Okay. There are spots in there, right? Those are not there when I did this. Those are from years of abuse. Now you can also see there's some scratching on these center parts here in here. Okay. The other thing I want to point out is you see the color right here, right here, right here. That lines up with the thin part. Okay. This part right here is a little bit dark. It's a little bit black. You'll notice that there's some marking on here. Okay. And you can actually see the color in this really well. You can see how this side is brighter than that side. Okay. That side is closer to the hub face. Okay. That is all heat from me overheating the brakes like crazy and overheating this axle through the hub all the way up through the axle. Okay. So that's what that is. That's why the grease inside this was black. And the grease inside this, you can even see it, is not. It's brown-ish, right? It's brownish, but it's not black. Come on, zoom in on this part. Brown, it's not black. Actually, you can see it in there really well. Brown, not black. Okay. So, why my balls don't get caught, okay, is because I took one of these and I actually polished the inside of this cage. And I polished this area. And I polished this area right here. Okay. Now, why that matters and why this might be something you want to look into doing is that if you have an old axle and you grab it and you grab this end, you might notice that it's kind of stiff. And it might not, if you take it all the way, you might not be able to just kind of wiggle it, right? That is the friction and the press fit of the balls against the cage, against the inner, and against the outer. Okay. By polishing these up just a little bit, polishing that up just a little bit, polishing this just until it doesn't want to come through, you're taking the friction out of all of that. Now, I do not, the only thing I did with the balls was clean them up, which these used to be a lot shinier. The heat has definitely made them not quite as shiny. That's essentially it. It's just to take an old, worn out, high grit, okay, high number, low actual grit, and then come in here and just polish this a little bit. Now, I want to point out there's like a burr there you can see in there, okay? You can see where the ball was actually touching by the wear mark, okay? And that is what these spots inside of here actually are as well. Those marks in there that I was pointing out. That is the high stress area of the axle applying power. That's where the balls would rest mostly, okay? Now, it's really easy if you want to do this yourself. By the way, this was a cheat in Spec Miata because their rules specifically state, because their racing is so tight, their rules specifically state you are not allowed to modify any OEM part or anything like that unless basically specifically told you could. The rear CV axles in a Miata have the same exact type of setup with a CV, and this reduces friction, which theoretically should free up horsepower. For us, who can just build 5 more horsepower or 10 more horsepower, not a big deal. Spec Miata, where they're literally fighting for 1 or 2 more horsepower, this matters, okay? So that was why they got DQ'd, is they took the axle off and they were able to do this. They were able to just pass the ball freely through the cage, and they had a brand new Mazda one, and they actually had a high mileage one that also did not do that. Because that is the other thing too. If you have a high mileage CV axle, chances are it might have rubbed some of that stuff for you. This was a factory axle. It was, you know, it's got the rust. Like, this was on a streetcar. This came out of a streetcar. This wasn't a new one that I did this to. Yeah, I mean, you can, you know, this was an old axle that I did this to. Okay. Now I'm going to reassemble this and then show you guys just how easy it can be to actually do this yourself if you want to. Now, the cage that I noticed, the cage is symmetrical. Yours may or may not be. These are, at least the I could tell. I also am going to say this side had the heat, this side didn't. So I am going to reassemble this the way it was, just in case it is different. However yours comes apart, make sure you put it back together the way it came apart, okay? This part, you can see, is not symmetrical, okay? The CV axle goes in here. Actually, it goes in this way. And then the C-clip, the clip there, fits against the backside where it's clipped out, okay? Right? I think, hold on, let me look at this thing with more. Yep, pretty sure. Actually, I think I had that backwards because there's actually a groove inside of there. There's a groove inside of there, and that is where that C-clip actually rests. It does not actually come out the end. And so the smaller portion goes inside, which does make more sense that it would continue to hold that way. So, all right. So we have the heat side and that side. We're going to make sure they go back together like this. And as you can see, it doesn't just go in. It's just Tetris. You just got to kind of fit it in and then wham. Okay. Now, this should also spin freely on here because the grooves have to line up with the holes. So you want to make sure that it can move, that this can move in here freely. Okay. So if you need to polish these edges up or even polish the inside of the cage, keep that in mind. The goal is not to remove a ton of material so there's a bunch of slop. The goal is just to polish it up so everything moves nicely. Okay. Now, the cool part about this is you put this in here and you leave those there for now. Okay. And again, that won't just go in. So you just have to find sideways and then it should rotate. Now, this one, I can tell you, if I was to use this again, I would polish that up slightly, either the cage or there, because it is not moving as freely as it could and it should. Okay. But you just simply rotate. Now, the other part of this is grease. You need grease in here. I am assembling it dry. So keep that in mind. You do want to put grease in here, but you want to line the cage, the hole in the cage with that, with a, there. Okay. So once those are lined up, take your ball, put it in. This is also where grease will help because it will help hold the balls as you're doing this. When you're doing it dry, they have a tendency to possibly fall out. Okay. Then you are just trying to wiggle this down around. And like this one is being stubborn and doesn't want to. The first few can be difficult. See, I got that ball trapped in there already. Come on, baby. I can always tell when I'm doing something informative because you guys never talk. Yeah, so that ball fell out already. Okay. So if that happens, just kind of rotate stuff around. Get it back up to the top. Okay. I also am doing this through the phone. Like I'm doing this through the screen. Okay. Which does make it harder to do. And you can even go to the next one. You don't necessarily have to do the one across the way. Put that one in. And you're just going to keep any of them that will let you this is where the grease really does help. All right, I gotta like not look through the phone screen. And hey, if you do this with a broken axle, all right, so we are gonna try something. I'm gonna take these back out because maybe I was wrong on something. There can be a few different combinations of ways this can go. Okay, this is I want to show you this. The cage, like I said, this is sticking. Okay, so we are going to attempt. We're going to see if I didn't have this wrong. Try rotating it. Come on, baby. I'll try rotating it around. Because this thing, bad boy, might just need... Yeah, I might have had it in backwards. Okay. It happens. And then this piece, go back in. All right, so now, hopefully. Oh, yeah, there we go. Now we're better off. And just rotate that down a little bit. Come back to me. The goal is to rotate it just enough that you can get it to pop in that cage. We'll talk about the grease here in just a second. Here, we're going to rotate that around too, just to see if maybe that was backwards. I'm sweating so bad right now. Nope. See, look, not everything goes to plan for Todd the first time. The other part of that is that this one is definitely wore out some, and it is due to be repolished. We'll just basically say that if I reuse this end. All right. I need the cage to go just a touch farther. Maybe this is backwards. There we go. Okay. Maybe. Yeah. Oh. We got viewers dropping like flies because they're like, well, if Todd can't do it, I'm not messing with it. I'm honestly assuming in this situation what's happening is that the ball bearings here are probably hitting that wear spot. That bottom one is, and it's just not wanting to go together like it should. Because with just the one in here, this should definitely move significantly more freely than it is. So, tell you what we're gonna do. Let's see if that is the actual problem. Just a second, I'll grab a drill. We're gonna try polishing this up just a little bit, and I'm gonna use an actual drill versus using like a die grinder or anything like that. So, and we'll see if we put a little polish on this, if that will help it. So I'm going to move you guys to the side slightly, just so that I can make it work. I'm also going to try grabbing me a stool to sit on, just so I'm a little more stable. All right. Then, okay. Actually, that would be smaller. So let's try this one. All right, we're gonna do this one right here. Okay. And we're gonna see if we can get it to open up a little bit. Okay. So you actually be able to see like the color of this one compared to the color of that one that we just did. Yeah. This is to come across on camera, but I can actually feel it hitching, whereas now it doesn't. So let me actually just go ahead real quick and do that to all of them. Last one. Okay, let me all right, now just for giggles. Yeah, I can still feel a little bit of hitching. Oh, that one especially. Let me see something. Maybe this one might be too big, but I'm going to try it real quick. Now, I will say too that this is something that using like a die grinder would definitely be a little better in this situation, just because it's this faster speed. You can actually have finer control. So yeah. I should point out too that I am more than likely not going to be using this cup. So just as a, you know, this is to show you how I'm doing it and to see if it'll go back together easier because of this. but chances are I'm not actually going to reuse this cup. Yeah. Okay, this one's dragging a bit still. And this is the process, guys and gals. This is the process. It's just, you know, going a little bit, you know, feeling to make sure, because that's the thing, is like feeling this with my fingers. Like you can see still, you know, the dark spot in here. I'm gonna try it right there beside my thumb. You can kind of see, you can still see the damage right there. Right, and that's where this is hitting. Like that's the spot that I can feel these hitching at. And that was kind of, as I was assembling this, that seemed to be where that ball wanted to stop. So that's why I'm likely not reusing this. Now I'm also going to take a second and just that was in between. That was these spots, just to see if I can get that cage to move a little better in there. So, but I can feel with my finger, I can still feel the damaged areas. Like that one's really bad. That one's pretty bad. This one's actually almost perfect. Same with that one. That one's not too bad, but this one especially is better. Definitely can feel the damage still. All right, let's go round two. All right, we're gonna try to move you guys back over here. Now this also, I want to point out that a lot of this. All right, where'd my other ball? All right, it's under here. A lot of this too that I'm doing here with this axle, this kind of goes on the subject we had last week or so of, you know, how a bolt can show, you know, why someone might be faster than you. This is the same kind of stuff. This is a junkyard axle. You know, this is literally not a high dollar part at all, right? But by me taking the extra time to come in here and take this apart and polish it and put grease in it, I've extended the life. I've reduced the friction. You know, chances are that this can help me finish a race I might not otherwise finish. And in that case, you know, that could be the difference between winning and losing. It could be the difference between, you know, being faster or not. So this is the kind of stuff that somebody might be doing. Yeah, that's a little bit looser. Ooh, I know the other thing we're going to do real. I was kind of not wanting to do this, but we're going to grease her up just a little bit, just a little bit, so that it moves a little freer. So a chunk of something, just to take a touch less friction out of it. This is the part, if I was assembling this for real, I would be pile driving grease into this thing. And we'll talk about the grease procedure here in just a second. So, all right, let's try this again. All right, There we go. A little bit more freedom. A little bit. Okay. And we're going to put this piece in. Okay. All right. Now let's see if all this hard work on camera pays off. I went too far. I went too far. I went too far. There we go. All right. Well, you want to go in that one? That's fine. Yeah. See, now, I think we went a little too far on that one. So now we got to try to bring her back. I think this cage is definitely just a slight bit too much friction. There we go. Come on, get in your home. Come on. Come on. We're so close. Oh, we're so close. Not gonna happen, is it? Let's try this. Let's try this. Woo! Hey, the good news is I did this all off air, so you guys don't see me looking silly. Like, that's the important thing. Okay. See that? Okay, so that definitely is not it, because that doesn't want to go past that. Okay, so that definitely goes in this direction, and we want to go just. Yeah. I need to polish this. I need to polish that. Is I think the problem here. So, because even here we're still stuck with just the one, because it just goes a little bit too far. It just goes a little bit too far down inside there. So let's try a different approach. Okay. Let's try just a little different approach. Put this one in. Okay. And we'll go to the one next to it. All right. There we go. We'll go to the one next to it. You know, I think that was the thing I figured out when I first started doing this, is that you can't go 180. That works the way around. Okay. We're remembering the things I learned. All right. One more. Guys and gals, we got one more. Okay. One more. Bam. There you go. Assembled back together. Okay. But you can see here that as this comes around, that ball stays in contact with the outer and the inner, even as this rotates at extreme angles, right? But now you can see, now that it's in and it's evenly spaced with all the balls, like, it actually moves pretty freely, okay? And I'm not going to put this all the way on, but if I have this in the spline, okay, like, right? Woo! Scott rebuilds these and does a lot of other axle related stuff down at Riverside here. So, hey, I remembered it, man. I remembered it. It just took me a minute. Okay. Now, I use grease when I assemble it, right? Because you need to. It makes it easier. Less friction, right? Now, Todd, what do you use for grease in here? Okay. First off, what do you use? If you do this, what do you use, right? I'm going to show you what this had in it and what is likely going to go back in it, because it's what we got. I also tried to grab that, but it is, where'd it go? Where'd it go? There it is. Now, I am working on trying to get Driven to come up with a solution for this, for me, okay? This is what I use right now. This is Redline CV2. It is, if you guys know about off-road axles, RCV makes some of the most badass CV joints for off-road, like Jeeps and stuff like that. This is what they put in them. When I worked for JCR Off-Road, I rebuilt a few, built a few, putting them into Jeeps, Dana 60 fronts, stuff like that. And this is what RCV says to use. So this is what I use. Now, the important thing to remember when you're greasing these axles is that they have to move, okay? So you don't want to take this thing like this with it flat and just absolutely fill it with grease, okay? You want to get pretty close, though, at least how I do it. I will get it here, and then I will just start scooping grease, putting it in, and just filling it, okay? Then move it around some so that it gets up in between. And you can come in here, put some, move it around. Just make sure it's got grease in it, okay? Scott uses AMSOIL high pressure synthetic racing bearing grease. All right. Once I have it to this stage, okay, where I've got it just full of grease, all that, I will put it together, spin it, and actually make sure I'm getting the full limit of travel just to use the axle shaft and here as the ability to make sure it just presses that grease all the way. Reason being, I personally do not mind having grease on the back side of here. I just want to make sure that I have pushed it through versus having it in the car and needing to do it then. Because I don't want it to shoot out of here at high speeds and blow the boot apart. Okay. You don't need any grease from here out. Well, I mean, you do in this part. You don't need any grease from here out. Okay. It's just going to be in the boot. You need it in here where the balls are, right? If it's in the boot, that's cool. It will never leave the boot and go back into the axle unless it's like really hot and melts it, and then it'll flow back in there, and that can be a problem. Okay. Grease doesn't flow. Now, if you got it down inside of there, chances are at high speed, the centripetal force in that can try to push it up through the balls, which can help push it around, right? But that's the basics. Okay. Now this end, okay, I usually go through and I will brake clean out and clean all those bearings, because you can just kind of grab them, clean them, go through, right? The trick, though, is you want to make sure you get that grease back in there. If you pull that grease out, you need to make sure grease goes back in because, again, it's not oil. If you only have grease on the top and you only have grease on the bottom, that means half of those roller bearings in the middle is not getting any sort of grease in them. So you want to get you a needle or something to make sure you get it down inside of there, rotate it around, play with it. That takes time to make sure that these are greased up properly. Okay. These don't see the temperature that those do. So, if you were to keep the OEM grease in here and not take these apart, keep them greased up. I've done that before. I've heard other people have success with that as well. Now, the other part of that is you don't fill this cup up with grease, because if you fill the cup up and you're here, because it's just packed full of grease, first time you put this in and you need to shove it into here, all that grease is going to come to the backside. And then when you extend it back out, all you're doing is pulling all that grease out to here, give or take. And then, well, then it just ends up in here. And unless you get it really, really hot, the grease that's in here will never again go back down into there. Okay. Because the force of this is going to sling it out. And that grease, this is sealed, so I'm not going to do it right this minute. If I take this cap off, right, and I go like this, I can sit here for days and weeks, probably a year. That grease is never going to go bloop, right? If it does, it's probably because it got too hot. You know, there's a problem. At normal temperature, at normal operating temperature, that grease is not fluid. It's more solid than anything else. Okay, so keep that in mind. You don't want to over grease these. Now, how come, Todd, if I go into the corner and I crank the wheel off as hard left as it'll go, and then I stand on the gas and then it bites, I break stuff? Well, that's because you are probably something like this, where you are on the outer edge of the cup and your cage and all of that. Okay. So the harder you turn, because this is, you know, you got to remember, if you've got a lot of camber like I do, like this is going back in with about 10 degrees of camber. Going in, it's going to be probably at that angle or so. Okay. That's nothing. Okay. However, this combined with this is. So if I've got full cranked left, right, that's where I'm at. Okay. So I've got the compound angle of camber and turning, right? That's the problem. Okay. And some of these axles are way beefier than others. Okay. I got bigger hands. You can see that axle shaft is almost the size of my thumb. Okay. The smallest part of that axle shaft is basically the size of my thumb, give or take just a little bit. Okay. How big is, you know, and you can't go off this part right here because these are covered with boots. You can't go off that because even right there's a groove. So it's smaller. There's a groove. It's smaller. But this one, next down, right? So you got to go off the smallest part. That is the weakest part of your axle shaft. It doesn't matter if that thing was that big around, if it's coming into this point, okay? So if you've got really tiny axle stabs or stubs right here, that's the other thing to remember too, is that you've got this small shaft. If that tire's spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, and all of a sudden it bites, that shock load gets transferred. Well, if this is stronger than that point right there, you're going to snap them, okay? And the other part of that is, you know, I mean, this is pretty wide across. It's a pretty good sized stub. I've seen some of these where the outside of this is about the size of that cage. The smaller your actual stub here is, okay, the smaller everything is inside of it. So if you have that little tiny stub and balls and cage and all that inside of here, higher horsepower, you know, if you've got a 300 horsepower car and you have something that's 2/3 the size of this, well, if I have 250 horse, let's just be generous, okay? We'll go 230. I was 228. This axle held up to 228 horsepower, okay? If I'm at 228 and I've got larger stuff here, I am not going to have the same axle problems that you're going to have at 300 horsepower at 2/3 the size. So that's why some cars are going to have axle issues, some cars aren't. So, yeah. Also, they make tools to stretch this size, this end of the boot over this part of the shaft. They work. They could, you know, if you have one, they work well. If you don't, axles are really easy to take apart. They should be really easy to take apart. Okay. All you got to do, when this goes together, okay, pretend this is all the way put together. Okay. Undo your clamp, undo your clamp. If you want to keep the boot, if you don't care about the boot, just cut it off. That's what I did. That's why I can't show you how it was ripped. Okay. That one was on this side. Slide your boot back. Okay. Hold your axle and then whack this with a hammer. You can actually see the marks from where I was whacking this with a hammer. Right there. Okay. What happens is this seat clip right here, okay, that part right there just needs to squeeze together and have that and slide out of here. Okay. That's all that has happened. If your axle is not manufactured properly, like if that was not beveled properly, if your seat clip isn't beveled properly, that can be a real task to get them apart. Okay. Now, the other option, I will say, is that you could do this end. This end, again, has a C-clip right there. You can see the top of this. See, it has a C-clip. You can pop that C-clip. You can slide this off, slide your boot, slide this boot off, slide this boot off, slide this one back on, slide that one back on, slide this back on. Because this just comes apart that easy. Okay. Right. So if all you're trying to do is change the boot, if you're not trying to get into the guts of this, you can do it that way. You can pull this end apart. Okay. Now, your mileage might vary. This is a Neon Shadow Daytona Caravan. This is a Chrysler axle. This is how Chrysler axles, for the most part, that I've ever found are assembled. Okay. I don't think I have ever found an axle that had this style end that did not have some sort of C-clip that you were supposed to just smack off. Don't be afraid to use like a plastic dead blow if you're worried about breaking it. Okay. Yeah. That is CV axles in a nutshell. And how you can use Spec Miata cheating to make yours better. And then just when you assemble it, don't try to do 180. Just do them one at a time. Okay. You guys got to watch me struggle. But I mean, you guys watch me polish it up too. So what's up, Chucky? So there we go. Bring this up here. Do this. Just a second. What's up? I gotta close. There we go. So there's where we're at. That is CV axle shafts in a nutshell. Okay. It's easier. Actually, I can unplug this thing at 83%. That is axles in a nutshell. If there is something you guys got a question about, throw it out there, whether it's axle related, not axle related. This thing is like, something's crooked. I think it's the phone. There we go. So if you got a question, toss it out. I'll give you an answer. Yeah. I do have to put a boot on this. I might assemble this axle, grease it up and assemble it. Now I got it together. It doesn't actually feel that bad. We might run it. Chances are I have a spare. It needs a boot. I have not polished it. This is the only polished axle. Well, this is the only left front. The polished right front is in the car. It's the only ones I've polished. So I might do that to the spare that I have and put it in instead. But I'm looking at the damage that's done to this one. Hard to say. Because I might just polish up this cage so that it wiggles a little freer. Like, it's not, it ain't bad, right? This guy says, run it. Chances are I will. I just, you know me, Scott. You know me well. It's hard to see something that isn't perfect. Now, the other part of that too is that the more you polish these, the more play you are going to get in it. Okay. And that's honestly probably part of what caused this damage is that there's just enough play that when I'm off the gas and it rotates back, right, on the brakes and stuff like that, your engine's, you're physically slowing the engine down and it's kind of backed up. When you stand on the gas, it hits. It's that initial thump. And then it's just constant pressure as you're turning. The damage ain't that bad. Considering, like I said, I polished this axle in 2019. So I've been running the same. Now, I ran the rest of 19, 20, 21. I didn't run 22 or 23. No, I ran 22. 23 is when I set out. So, because 22, I broke it at Super Shoe. So I ran the rest of 19 because it happened early in the year, 19, 20, 21, 22. So I ran 3 seasons plus 1.5 at in Dad's car. So 4 years, right? 4 years on this axle. That damage ain't that bad for 4 years. So, but the car owner says run it. The axle specialist whose garage I'm sitting in says run it. So I had tube of grease here and some boots in there. Oh, let me show you guys the clamps. You can use things like zip ties and stuff like that. These clamps, I don't know where we got them because these are a holdover from Earl. But like we bought them, and I just dropped like 3 of them. Like we bought a bag of them. There's a bunch of these in here. Okay, right. These clamps are super simple, super easy to use. Right. Big end of the clamp, and like I said, these are universal. So like these things will go literally all the way out to here. Okay. So the trick is, and you can cut these, like these universal ones, you can cut because we are here. Okay. Right here is the end where my finger is, and it's going to go all the way around. Okay. So we have this much excess. Okay. But when you're here, these have little teeth. You see the teeth in there, and they just bite into those squares. Like so. Okay. Then it's real easy. This part here, this square, see it on my forehead there? They make a tool, which, Scott, do you have one? Since we're in your garage. They make a tool that comes in and just bites it. Okay. You can do the same thing with a set of diagonal cutters. Go on one side. Now, mind you, your diagonal cutters are here. So it's going to clamp one side more, but then you just do this side and then that side a little bit. And you just go until there's tension. It's that easy. Okay. I will try to find a link for these, where we bought them. They're probably on Amazon. It's probably where we got them. They're just CV boot clamps. Okay. These are also very easy to take off. That little part that sticks up from the ends, grab that with a pair of diagonal cutters and pop it off, and they come right off. Okay. So there you go. And if you find that you just need a boot, if you've got a good axle, it's still lasting, it's worth putting a boot on an axle, especially one that you know is good. So yeah, probably use PEX tool to crimp them also. Yeah, if you have a PEX clip tool, it's the exact same thing as a PEX clip. It's the exact same idea as a PEX clip when you're just clamping it down. And there's multiple names for these. The other thing that you can use too, which you might even have, Scott, is they're the diagonal cutters that are this way instead of being, this way, but they're the ones that clamp like an end one. You could use something like that too. So I have a smaller pair of those, but the idea is you're just putting tension on, because there's not a lot of force on these boots. Like this boot, when it goes on, like it's tight on here, right? So you're just stopping water and stuff from going in there. That's really all you're doing. So it doesn't take a lot of force to hold them tight. Like this one was held on. We had 2 zip ties on the inside of that one. Because when the boot clamp came off, right? So what's up, Mr. Binkley? Yeah, they're not difficult to use. They're cheap to buy. So don't be afraid to put an actual clamp on there. So yeah. Well, if nobody else has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and try to get this axle I just did. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get it greased up and get some boots on it, and then get it put back together so that I can get it put in the car. That way that is all done tonight, and we can get started on the body, because once this is in, the other thing that I do have to do on the car is inner and outer tie rods yet. That's basically the only thing I have left in the left front once I get the axle and then put the brakes on. So, but I'm waiting to put the axle or brakes, the rotor and the caliper net on until I get the axle in. So pretty close to having the suspension back together to be able to set this thing down. We're doing some body work on the front because Dad wanted to, and we didn't have time before Bristol, so we're going to do it now. So, yeah. Thank you all for being here. If you haven't already, hit the like button. It is the only thing I ask of you. So, thank you all for being here. Facebook or YouTube, I love you. I appreciate you, and we'll see you really soon.